When you're taking your employer to tribunal, evidence is everything, and it's not actually as complex or as hard to prove as you might think it is, but you can still get it wrong. So here are the 7 top mistakes that we see when people are taking their employer to tribunal when it comes to evidence. The first one is very common, and it's relying on emotion instead of evidence. There's a real mindset shift that you need to go through as you go through the tribunal process, moving from "I was wronged," which is perfectly legitimate, by the way, to "This is exactly what happened to me, this is the legislation that it violated, and here are the key events that support that." So it's the difference between "my manager constantly bullied me and ruined my mental health," and "on the 18th of November, my manager, Sam Smith, said this to me. This was after the previous 3 incidents I reported. I needed to go to the doctor later that day. I was suffering from panic attacks," etc., etc. Another example might be, instead of saying "my manager will just send me to any office anytime it suits him," you might change that to "here are 10 documented examples over the last 2 months of where my manager asked me to work outside of my contracted place of work." And that brings me on to mistake number 2, which is not keeping a clear timeline of events. This is such a powerful and simple thing that you can do, and honestly, this is the key one to make sure that you do. And it really is just writing down the who, what, when, where of every single incident that has happened. You won't use this timeline when you submit a tribunal claim, but it will come in very handy when you get to the final hearing in your witness statement or your witness testimony. Writing down what happened also counts as evidence. This is your account of what happened. And if you have a note from back in the day where you wrote it down or emailed yourself or recorded it in Vala, then the judge will use that as evidence. This is where it's really easy to make the third mistake, which is having disorganized evidence. My co-host Donna Patterson on the Employment Tribunal Support Group, she talks a lot about this. She represented herself against a QC in the tribunal and won. And she talked a lot about how having her evidence tidy and organized all the way through the whole process made such a difference for her. She often says, "You are the expert in your own case." And this is such a good example of how powerful that can be. If you have nice, clean, tidy, organized evidence that you can refer back to, then you'll be able to catch during a hearing when somebody has it wrong, flip back to the evidence and say, "Wait a minute, let's look at that again." Now, we don't often see this next mistake, but it's worth pointing out that altering or somehow removing evidence is definitely going to be a mistake. Not only might you lose your case, but if the court feels that you were vexatious by removing or altering evidence, that is one of the few instances where they might actually ask you to pay the other side's costs or their legal fees. So it goes without saying, don't make that mistake. Another mistake we sometimes see is overlooking employer documents. So getting your hands on HR records, employee handbooks, disciplinary records, things like that. They're not always the easiest to get a hold of because you have to ask your employer for them if you don't have them, but you can ask for these. The first way to try to get these documents is via the data subject access request, which is any document that refers to you as a personally identifiable person. You can ask for that. So that would be great for, say, a disciplinary document about yourself. For more general documents like contracts or policies and handbooks, you can ask during the disclosure process. You just need to make sure that you say why you think it's relevant if they disagree and you have to take it to the judge. So while these documents might be harder to get, it is worth trying to get them because they can really make or break a case sometimes. Another thing that is worth trying to get, but people often don't try to get, is some kind of witness statement. Now, we often tell people you are your best witness, and many people go to tribunal with only themselves as a witness. So don't worry if that's all you have, but it is worth trying if it would be relevant to get someone else to become a witness for you. In extreme situations, you can ask for what is called a witness order, where the tribunal can actually order that person to become a witness. It's a high-risk strategy because they might be quite reluctant, but it's good to know that it is there as an option. And don't forget that your family and friends can also be witnesses, especially if they are attesting to the impact of a situation on you. That can be very valuable for things like injury to feelings claims, where part of the award is based on the impact it had on you psychologically. And often friends or family are best placed for giving those kinds of accounts. Finally, the last mistake that we often see is throwing the kitchen sink at evidence, kind of submitting everything that you have. The tribunal will not love you for this, and let me talk you through why. Totally get this, because how do you know what is relevant? Isn't it their job to figure that out? But there are ways that you can tell what is likely to be relevant and what isn't. The key thing is that you want to look at the claims that you are making in the tribunal. And if you've gone through a preliminary hearing, the legal questions, that's called the list of issues for each claim, and then ask yourself, is this piece of evidence going to speak to one of those list of issue questions? So if, for example, you had a victimization claim and one of the things that you needed to prove was that you had made a protected act in the first place, which is complaining about discrimination, then yes, the email where you raise the complaint is absolutely a key piece of evidence. The email that you sent 2 days later complaining about an unrelated issue might not be as relevant. So use that list of issues to guide yourself. The other thing to watch out for is make sure that you're also proving, if you have an injury to feelings element of your case, make sure that you're also using evidence to show the impact it had on you. Those statements from friends and family, medical records, etc. Because that is the evidence that will help you make an argument for a particular amount in that injury to feelings claim. Now, if this is all feeling a little bit overwhelming, don't worry. You can track and manage your evidence for free on the Vala platform, and we can definitely support you when it comes to writing your witness statement, organizing your evidence, exchanging evidence during the bundle, and cross-examination and using that evidence in the final hearing. You're not on your own.